You are not the father of the defendant's son, Travaris, but know who is. You believe Mr. Robinson is denying your son only because he was summoned to pay more than $13,000 in back child support. Am I correct?
He told me he had 3 children.
Okay.
And he was not in their life. I made him get in their life.
You say that's not true, Ms. Brandt?
That is where he signed and say that is his child. I think it was a couple of months, Your Honor.
So this was right after he was born?
Right. We was going places together. He brought stuff. I mean, we was like as a family. I mean,
when a DNA test enters a family's life, it does more than reveal biology. It exposes regrets, forces truth into the open, and challenges the very meaning of love, loyalty, and justice. In the courtroom of Judge Lauren Lake, conversations about family, identity, and law are never simply legal matters. They are deeply human journeys filled with fear, hope, shame, relief, and the search for truth. The moment a person stands in front of Judge Lauren Lake, they are not simply looking for a scientific answer. They are trying to understand how a single result might reshape their life. And this is why so many people say DNA test people regret taking, because the truth changes everything. The truth is irreversible. Once revealed, it becomes the new foundation on which relationships, responsibilities, and futures must be rebuilt. In many divorce cases, custody cases, or paternity disputes, a DNA test is treated like the final piece of evidence. Yet emotionally, it often becomes the first step in confronting unresolved pain. This is what is discussed in countless stories shared through platforms like the Truth Changes Everything podcast and the Divorce Course podcast, where individuals describe how one scientific result overturned years of assumptions, silence, anger, and denial. Even on the Game Changing Attorney podcast, professionals discuss how legal decisions do not only shape courtrooms, they shape families and generations. Judge Lauren Lake always reminds people that the relationship between law and justice is complicated. The law is written on paper, but justice is lived in reality. Sometimes, the law recognizes a father simply because his name is on a birth certificate, or because he signed an acknowledgement of paternity. But the concept of justice in jurisprudence is broader. It includes truth, intention, responsibility, and the emotional bonds that define family. This is why many people feel that a courtroom is not just where disputes are resolved. It is where identities are restored. When families come to court, each person carries a different version of the story. One may say, "I was there, I tried, I called, I visited." Another may say, "You abandoned me, you denied me, you disappeared." And somewhere in the middle stands a child, who often grows up hearing pieces of each version, trying to understand who they are. This is why adoption stories' full episodes are also deeply emotional, because identity is not only about blood, it is about belonging, acceptance, and the right to know your truth. Many people who share their stories on platforms like Celebrate Recovery Testimonies admit that the emotional damage caused by uncertain parenthood can follow a person for life. Some describe feeling incomplete without knowing where they come from. Others say they formed strong identities without biological connection because love was present. But in paternity disputes, the question remains powerful. Does biology define family, or does commitment define family? Different people answer this differently, and that is what makes these cases so deeply personal. The evidence stage in a divorce case can be especially painful when it involves accusations of infidelity or secret relationships. Many DNA test cheating stories begin with one partner searching for peace of mind, but instead finding a truth that breaks the emotional fabric of the relationship. It is common for people to request DNA testing not because they want to punish someone, but because they want to free themselves from doubt. Doubt is heavy. Doubt is poison. Doubt changes how a person looks at love, but truth, even when painful, is the first step toward healing. Legal systems around the world recognize this tension. Courts often apply the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act, which means if a person refuses a DNA test, the court may assume that the refusal is a sign of hiding the truth. That is why many individuals agree to testing even when they feel emotionally unprepared. The law pushes for clarity, while the heart struggles to accept it. Judge Lauren Lake often guides families toward honesty, even when the truth is uncomfortable. She emphasizes communication, accountability, and emotional closure. When individuals tell their stories in her courtroom, the narrative is not just about who is the father. It is about what happened when the relationships broke, when support disappeared, when trust was damaged. These stories go deeper than biology. They explore responsibility and love. Many cases also highlight how Supreme Court child support laws encourage financial responsibility regardless of emotional connection. Sometimes a man who is not the biological father remains legally responsible if he legally acknowledged the child or acted as a parent for many years. This legal principle is based on protecting the child, not punishing the adult. But emotionally, it can feel unfair. A person may ask, why should I pay when I am not biologically connected? The deeper answer is that parenting is not only biology. Parenting is loyalty, presence, and contribution to a child's life. At the same time, some mothers express regret or guilt when uncertainty about paternity is finally exposed. Some fathers express pain because they feel that years of bonding become questioned. And children, even grown ones, sometimes describe the revelation as losing identity and gaining identity simultaneously. The truth both hurts and heals. In many testimonies shared in recovery and relationship-based podcasts, people describe how DNA results forced them to rebuild their understanding of self. Some found closure, some found new family connections, some found relief, some found heartbreak, others found forgiveness. But in every story, the truth changed everything. The law can order DNA testing. The law can assign child support. The law can document parenting rights. But justice involves understanding the humanity behind the situation. Judge Lauren Lake's approach combines legal reasoning with emotional empathy, helping families not only find answers, but also discover a path forward. Because at the end of every case, behind every DNA test, there is a real person trying to understand where they belong. The journey toward truth often begins long before anyone steps into Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom. It begins in quiet moments, in private questions that a person carries for years. Many individuals describe lying awake at night wondering whether they were wrong, whether they should have spoken sooner, whether they should have asked for proof earlier. Sometimes, the fear of knowing is greater than the pain of not knowing. This is why so many DNA test people regret taking the test at first, because the result can feel like a doorway to a life that they are not ready to walk into. But Judge Lauren Lake teaches that one cannot build a future on uncertainty. Truth is a necessary foundation. In several discussions featured in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, lawyers explain that legal justice requires clarity. A court cannot rule based on assumption, emotional arguments, or stories shaped by memory and pain. It must rely on evidence, timing, legal documentation, and the scientifically verifiable truth. And yet, the courtroom does not exist in a vacuum. It exists among human lives. This is where the delicate balance between law and the heart must be respected. Across many divorce case testimonies, individuals express how unresolved paternity questions add bitterness, confusion, and resentment to already strained relationships. When couples reach the evidence stage in a divorce case, they often realize that they are not only arguing about finances or custody, but also about identity, loyalty, betrayal, and responsibility. Words like "you never cared," "you weren't there," or "you just wanted to escape responsibility" carry emotional weight that DNA results cannot erase. The search for truth reveals patterns in relationships, how trust was lost, how communication broke down, how fear replaced intimacy. In this sense, the relationship is not only examined legally but also emotionally. Listeners of the Divorce Course podcast describe this stage as the moment when both partners must confront the reality of the relationship they created together and the consequences of the choices they made apart. But truth does not destroy only romantic relationships. It can also reshape the bond between parent and child. For many adults who grew up without knowing their biological father, the question, "Who am I?" becomes a quiet ache inside. Some try to fill that space by building strong relationships with step-parents, adoptive parents, mentors, or family friends. This is why Adoption Stories full episodes often show how powerful love can be even without biological ties. But for some, the desire to know their biological roots remains strong. They want to understand where their story began. Judge Lauren Lake has often emphasized that children deserve to know their origin, not to assign blame, not to create conflict, but to understand themselves. Identity is not just a name. Identity is history, family, culture, personality, and emotional belonging. Without clarity, many individuals feel incomplete, as though part of their story is hidden from them. This emotional struggle is often seen in Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where individuals explain how unresolved identity conflicts affected their mental health, relationships, and sense of worth. Some describe feeling rejected even when rejection was never intentional. Others describe how the absence of a father figure shaped their personality, either making them strong and self-reliant, or leaving them guarded and emotionally distant. In the legal world, however, identity disputes are influenced by laws such as the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act, which can allow the court to interpret refusal of DNA testing as an indication of guilt or concealment. This principle emphasizes the importance of transparency in legal proceedings. It is a reminder that justice is not only about outcomes, but about the cooperation of those involved. Judge Lauren Lake consistently encourages honesty, not only in testimony, but in intention. She asks individuals to confront why they are denying, resisting, avoiding, or demanding the truth, because often the truth threatens something deeper: reputation, pride, emotional protection, or the image a person has of themselves. Some individuals fear that a DNA result will prove they were betrayed. Some fear it will reveal that they unknowingly raised a child that was not biologically theirs. Some fear that learning the truth will damage their bond with a child they deeply love. And others fear that it will confirm their greatest insecurity, that they were never chosen, never prioritized, never loved. In many ways, DNA results force people to confront their emotional history. This confrontation can be painful, but it can also be freeing. This duality is reflected in the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Legal justice may state that a person owes child support, but emotional justice may recognize that a child does not simply need financial support, but consistency, presence, and care. The law can enforce payment, but it cannot enforce love. It can assign responsibility, but it cannot build emotional connection. And so families learn that justice is not a single event. It is a process. This is why discussions in the Divorce Course podcast and Truth Changes Everything podcast often highlight that healing begins when the truth is accepted, not when the judgment is issued. Acceptance is the emotional verdict that must follow the legal one. The tension between biological truth and emotional truth becomes clear in Supreme Court child support rulings, where sometimes a non-biological father may still be legally responsible if he knowingly acted as a parent. The court's reasoning is based on what protects the child, not what is easiest for the adult. A child cannot be left financially unsupported because of adult mistakes or late revelations. But this legal principle can create emotional conflict, especially when the relationship between the child and the legal father was fragile or distant. However, many individuals who share their recovery journeys explain that love can grow after truth is revealed. A father who learns he is biologically connected may suddenly feel a new sense of identity, purpose, and pride. Likewise, a child may feel relief when confusion is replaced with certainty. Some families reconcile, some rebuild, some begin new chapters separately. The emotional environment of Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom reflects this complexity. When the DNA test results are read, the room often holds its breath. The result is not just words on paper, it is a moment that restructures reality. If the result confirms paternity, there may be tears of joy, relief, gratitude, and apology. If the result denies paternity, there may be shock, devastation, guilt, disappointment, or quiet acceptance. Some say that the hardest cases are the ones where both possible fathers wanted to belong, but neither is biologically connected. In those moments, Judge Lauren Lake often focuses on compassion and guidance, reminding families that the child still deserves truth, love, and stability moving forward. The relationship between law and justice becomes clear here. Law provides the answer. Justice helps people understand what to do with the answer. This is the emotional core of every case. When the truth is revealed through a DNA test, the journey does not end. In many ways it begins there. Judge Lauren Lake often reminds families that the truth is only the first step toward healing. What comes next is acceptance, accountability, and rebuilding. But rebuilding takes time, patience, and willingness. Many people want closure, yet closure rarely arrives instantly. It unfolds. The truth forces individuals to reconsider their memories. A person may look back on years of conflict and now see why certain misunderstandings happened. Others may recognize that their anger was rooted in confusion that could have been resolved if honesty had come earlier. Many describe in interviews on the Truth Changes Everything podcast that the truth did not necessarily make the situation easier at first, but it made the situation real, and only what is real can be repaired. Families must now define what relationships look like after knowledge enters. If a father learns he is biologically connected, he may feel a new sense of responsibility, not because the court requires it, but because identity awakens something emotional and instinctive. If a man learns he is not the biological father, the emotional impact can be deep and complex. Some feel relief, some feel loss, some feel betrayed, some feel free, and some feel confused because they formed a bond that biology cannot erase. Judge Lauren Lake has seen men choose to stay in a child's life, even when DNA says otherwise, because the love they developed was real. Biology is a fact. Love is a choice. The courtroom, then, becomes a space where truth and choice meet. When explaining the relationship between law and justice, Judge Lauren Lake often emphasizes that while the law can identify a biological link, justice requires emotional maturity. Justice demands that adults make decisions that prioritize the well-being of the child, not their pride, frustration, or personal hurt. This perspective echoes conversations from the Divorce Course podcast, where individuals reflect on how the hardest part of separation is not the ending, but the adjustment that follows. Healing requires cooperation, communication, and the ability to let go of past wounds. In many Celebrate Recovery testimonies, individuals speak about how uncovering the truth allowed them to finally understand themselves. Some found that knowing their father clarified inherited traits, personality patterns, and even medical history. Others found peace in knowing that they were not abandoned by choice, but by circumstances or misunderstanding. Understanding does not erase pain, but it creates room for forgiveness. Forgiveness is a central theme in cases involving paternity disputes. Parents must forgive each other for mistakes made when they were younger, confused, scared, or ill-prepared for responsibility. Children must forgive parents for emotional distance or absence. And just as importantly, adults must learn to forgive themselves. Many people in these cases carry guilt. Guilt for not asking questions sooner. Guilt for believing a false story. Guilt for not being present. Guilt for not loving in the right way at the right time. But guilt does not heal. Acceptance does. Accountability does. Moving forward does. Some families find ways to use the truth to strengthen relationships. Others redefine boundaries and learn to connect slowly. A new relationship does not have to mirror the past. It can be more honest, clearer, healthier. Whether the bond is biological or emotional, what matters is intentional presence. This is especially significant in Adoption Stories full episodes, where families prove that love can form without shared blood. Identity can expand rather than collapse when truth is revealed. A person can have more than one place where they belong. A child can have more than one person who loves them. A father can be more than the one written in DNA. He can also be the one who shows up. The law, however, must still operate according to structured principles. In cases discussed in legal commentary, including Supreme Court child support frameworks, when a person willingly signed paternity acknowledgement or acted as a parent for many years, the law may continue to assign responsibility regardless of biological outcome. This principle protects children from being harmed by sudden emotional withdrawal or financial abandonment. The law protects stability because a child's life should not be disrupted simply because truth arrived late. Yet emotionally, this can be difficult for adults to accept. They may feel that the truth should release them from legal obligation, but the court must balance truth with continuity. The legal concept of adverse inference in evidence act demonstrates how important transparency is. Refusing to provide evidence or avoiding DNA testing suggests that one fears the truth. A courtroom relies on clarity. Justice must be reachable, not obscured. This balance between emotional truth and legal truth reflects the broader concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice seeks fairness, but fairness must consider the impact on everyone involved, especially the child who did not create the situation, but must live in its outcome. Judge Lauren Lake consistently emphasizes that children should not carry the emotional burdens caused by adult conflicts. A child deserves a sense of belonging and identity that does not shift unpredictably. When families begin to rebuild after the truth is known, new forms of understanding emerge. Parents may choose to co-parent with clearer expectations. Family members who once argued may learn how to communicate without blame. Extended relatives who once fueled rumors or doubt may take a step back and allow healing to occur. Listeners of the Game-Changing Attorney podcast often reflect that true conflict resolution requires not only legal settlement, but emotional maturity. And yet, not every story resolves neatly. Some relationships remain strained. Some individuals choose distance. Some children grow up forming their own conclusions about love and responsibility. Life is not guaranteed to follow a perfect narrative, but the presence of truth ensures that life is lived with clarity instead of confusion. The emotional power of these journeys is what moves audiences when they watch Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom. They see real people trying to piece together identity, responsibility, forgiveness, and justice. The cases are not scripted. The emotions are not staged. A DNA test can be scientific, but the reaction to its result is deeply human. For some, the moment after the results are read is the first moment they truly know who they are. For others, it is the moment they realize they must learn to be someone new. For all, it is the moment when the past must be acknowledged and the future must be faced honestly. Because when the truth arrives, it does not ask whether you are ready. It simply becomes the new reality. And from that moment, life moves forward. In the end, Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom is not just a place of legal decision. It is a place where people rediscover identity, reconcile with history, and rebuild their futures. The truth does not destroy families. It reveals what must be repaired, what must be nurtured, and what must be released. The journey continues after the final words are spoken, after the papers are signed, after the courtroom doors close. The real work happens in the everyday moments afterward. The phone calls, the apologies, the visits, the promises kept, the understanding gained. Because ultimately, the truth does not change everything on its own. What people choose to do with the truth is what determines everything that happens next.